Hey, this is Mad Movie Mark of the Mad Movie Mark Movie Review. Thank you for joining me as I review the 1937 fantasy musical animated film Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
There's dirty work afoot.
Hey, that's not fair. I promise I have only good intentions. There's nothing menacing or evil or bad afoot. I'm just reviewing every movie in this book, the 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die, and I'm going somewhat chronologically. Now, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was nominated for Best Musical Score. It lost to a film called 100 Men and a Girl, which sounds a lot like a reality show that my wife watches today. I think they're on some sort of island. I believe this movie stars Adriana Casaletti. I think that's her name. She voices Snow White, and it is based off the Brothers Grimm. This was the first full-length animated feature. It proved that animation could carry a full narrative and have emotional weight. It showed that animation could be more than comedy. They could include romance, suspense, horror, and drama. It was groundbreaking with technical innovation. It had multi-pane camera for depth and realism, more lifelike characters with animation and movement, and advanced use of color, lighting, and shadow. It established the Disney formula, which was fairy tale storytelling, musical numbers integrated into the plot, clear moral themes, which would be good versus evil, and memorable side characters. And it became one of the highest grossing films of its time and turned the Walt Disney Company into a force to be reckoned with. Now, I love this movie, and I don't know what else I could add to the conversation with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs that hasn't been said before. So obviously, when this movie opens up, we are introduced to Snow White. She lives with her evil stepmother. Her stepmother, who is the queen, asks her mirror every day who is the fairest of all, and as long as the mirror says that it is the queen, everything is hunky-dory. One day the mirror does say that Snow White is the fairest of all. At the same time, Snow White is falling in love with a handsome prince. Now the queen, of course, goes absolutely insane because she is incredibly vain and can be only be the fairest person in all of town. I don't know why that matters to her, though, because she doesn't seem to pursue any relationships. So she just wants to be the fairest person in all of the land while sitting in her castle all day. She hires a huntsman to go take Snow White into the woods and take her heart out of her chest and put it in a box. Now, the huntsman is not able to do this. He has moral reasons for not being able to kill Snow White. So he basically sends her off into the woods where she has this horror scene happen to her where all these trees and animals are coming to life and chasing her. And it really is, there's a lot of on the edge of your seats scenes in this movie, and this is the first one where you actually believe that Snow White is in danger and that something bad can happen to her. And I imagine watching this in 1937, it is incredibly frightening, this scene. Eventually, though, the good animals come out of the woodwork and they basically take her to the house of the Seven Dwarfs, where she walks in on her own. She knocks on the door, no one answers, she decides to go in on her own. She cleans up the place and then falls asleep. Now the dwarves who are working, I think this is a mine that they own with tons of diamonds in it, and they start singing this song about how you can get rich by mining in your own diamond mine as long as you work really hard at it. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Maybe I'll try that one day. I'll just go to my diamond mine and whistle while I work, and I'll be incredibly rich. So they end up going home and they realize that their entire house has been cleaned, and they think that there's some sort of trouble afoot. At least Grumpy does. Everyone else seems like they're concerned that their house has been cleaned because they've never seen their stuff cleaned before, but they're mostly frightened by it. They end up sending Dopey upstairs to see what's going on, and he thinks that the Snow White is a monster. They eventually find out that it is a woman and not a monster, and they let her live with them because she agrees to cook dinner for them and clean for them. But first they have to wash up, which they've never done before. So they go into this room with like a trough, and I think it's Doc who explains to them how they're supposed to clean themselves, and they eventually rope Grumpy into doing it too. He does it he doesn't want to do it. He is a non-conforming person here. They force him to clean up, and eventually Snow White goes off, or they go to work the next day, and Snow White is left at her house alone. The queen asks her mirror again, who is the fairest of all, and the mirror still says that Snow White is alive. So the queen gets very upset, turns herself into an old hag, takes a poisoned apple, and cackling and laughing and enjoying this diabolical plan to make it seem like Snow White is dead, and she hopes that Snow White will be buried alive. She heads herself away to the house of the Seven Dwarfs. I'm assuming that this is a nod to Adam and Eve, though I'm not a religious person. It seems like the temptation of the poison apple is something that they took directly from Adam and Eve. So she gets to the house and she convinces Snow White to take the apple. And of course, Snow White passes out and dies. Or doesn't die, she's alive, but she seems mostly dead. If she was all dead, they would just rummage through her pockets and look for loose change. But she's mostly dead. And it seems like the queen is blaving, pretending that she is all the way dead. So the woodland creatures go off and they get the Seven Dwarves, and they lead them back to the house where the wicked queen is still there, and they chase her up a mountain and she ends up dying, which is another very tense, on the edge of your seat scene, because these are seven dwarves who were just very frightened at the thought of someone being in their home. They really had no backbone, but the idea that someone is hurting this person that they care for very much, the idea that someone has entered their home and assaulted this Snow White, who they love very much, has given them the passion and the energy and the courage to go chase this witch up the mountain and kill her. It's really a very powerful scene. It's not only a tense scene, it's a very on the edge of your seat, but it's a very powerful, moving scene that they are willing to do this, where before they had no courage, and now they have all the courage in the world to do this. Very powerful, a very amazing scene. So she ends up, they're not able to bury her. They don't feel like it's right. They don't want to put her under the ground. So they put her in like this glass casing, and eventually the prince comes and kisses her, and she comes back alive, and then she goes off with the prince. I think this movie is fantastic. It's a great animated film. Now, I've heard people say it hasn't aged well for a couple different reasons. First of all, the voice of Snow White is kind of high-pitched. It seems like it's a little out of place at times with the rest of the movie. My understanding is that that's just how they talked back then in movies, how women talked. So it's kind of, I mean, it's the 1930s, things are a little bit different, tastes are a little bit different, and they're just kind of giving the audience what they're used to in terms of her voice. Second, I've heard that this is one of the weaker love stories in a Disney movie. I will say, if you're looking at the love story based off the Prince and Snow White, it is incredibly weak in that they don't really have any like courtship going on. You don't really feel like they love each other throughout the film because they barely see each other. They're barely together. The prince is very one-dimensional. You only see him once in the very beginning, and at the end, there's no personality there. He is very boxy, I would say, in a way. If you're taking that as the only love story in the film, it's a very weak love story. I think there's a love story here between the Seven Dwarfs and Snow White, though, and that's the arc that you're looking for. Whereas they're very afraid of each other in the beginning, and then they have this very deep friendship. They build up with each other through basically they both need each other. The dwarves realize they need her for the cleaning and the cooking and companionship because they really have no one. These are seven bachelors who go work all day and then they come home. They seem like they don't have that much fun in their life. They seem like it's just routine. They're very much into their routines. You could tell by how upset they get by things being cleaned, how upset they get by just anything being different. and this kind of breaks them out of their routine. Obviously, she needs them as well. And then that develops into this love and admiration they have for each other at the end, where the dwarves fight for her. They fight the queen, and then they don't allow her to be buried because they have this love and admiration for her. So I would say the love story here, really the great love story, is the Seven Dwarfs and Snow White. And there's also this love story between her and the animals too. I mean, she talks to the animals love her, she's fantastic with them. They save her at the end of the movie by going off and getting the Seven Dwarfs. So there's other love stories going on here. The one with the prince and her is very weak, but I don't think it's really meant to be that strong. I think he's just there to serve a purpose at the end when he has to break the curse, and that's the whole reason why he's there. Also, I will say, when I was younger, obviously I saw this movie when I was younger, I was a huge fan of Dopey just because of how ridiculous he was and how off the wall he was. But as I get older, I feel like I much more sympathize with Sleepy. Sleepy's falling asleep everywhere. He's tired. He's worked all day. He just wants to lay down and rest. I'm like, that is my guy. Sleepy is the guy that I recognize, that I feel like I'm the most like. My only critiques of this movie really is that sometimes I feel like the Seven Dwarfs are almost treated like children and not as adults and not as men, because of their size and their stature, and because they have like sometimes goofy names like Dopey and Sneezy and Bashful. They're not always treated like adults, but that being said, they're also treated like husbands. Like when Snow White tells them to go wash up because they don't wash up, she's like giving them orders, and these are men who don't clean. They don't clean themselves or their house. So at times it feels like they're treated like children, which I'm not a huge fan of, but you could also say that they're just treated like husbands. So you can take that either way you want. But watching a lot of movies from the 1930s, I think for this list itself, I've done about 70 or so movies from the 1930s. And then aside from this list, I've probably seen about another 20 or 30 movies from the 1930s. So I'm about 100 movies total from the 1930s that I've seen in my lifetime. And I think that only 3 of them have been in color, but I love this film. I think it still stands up today. If you just look at it the right way and you appreciate it the right way, it still stands up today. I've also heard critiques that Snow White is like a damsel in distress, which I don't really understand. I mean, when she stood up to the huntsman, really, she went off into the woods by herself. She went into a house that she had never been to. She had the guts to like go into the house on her own. I mean, she doesn't seem like she's a damsel in distress at all. She seems like someone who mutually is needed and mutually needs someone else. So I don't get that critique either. I think this movie has aged well, and I think it's really, really quite good. And I'm going to give it a 9.5. I hope you join me next time when I review a movie called Captain Courageous. Thank you. Have a great day.